If this is your first time watching my videos, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next real horror story. Grab your headphones, sit back, and let's dive into tonight's disturbing tales. I used to think the 4th of July was one of those holidays that could never feel creepy. Fireworks, food, laughter, and family. It's supposed to be the safest day of summer. But 2 years ago, I learned that even a bright, sunny afternoon can turn into something that feels completely wrong. My girlfriend at the time, Hannah, invited me to her hometown's annual parade. She said it was a big deal there. Every family along the main street set up chairs early in the morning, and the whole neighborhood came out to watch. It sounded wholesome, like something out of a small-town movie. We arrived around 11. The sun was sharp and hot. Kids were running with flags, and the smell of grilled food hung in the air. Everything looked normal at first, but as we walked closer to the main road, I realized how strangely quiet it was. For a parade, I mean. There were no bands warming up, no loud chatter, just this steady hum of wind that drowned everything else out. The floats were already lined up down the street, but none of the people on them were moving. They stood completely still, faces blank, staring forward. I thought maybe it was some kind of opening ceremony, so I didn't say anything. Hannah waved at one of the older women sitting near the curb, but the woman didn't move. Her head turned slowly, but her eyes looked glassy, unfocused. It was like she wasn't really seeing us. I remember turning to Hannah and asking if she knew her. She frowned and said she thought it looked like Mrs. Boyd from her old street, but she passed away a few years ago. A few minutes later, the parade started, or at least it looked like it did. The first float rolled forward, creaking like old wood, but there was no music, no engine noise, nothing mechanical, just the sound of the wheels scraping the asphalt. The people on the float didn't wave, their heads turned slowly from side to side, and their expressions never changed. One of them was a man in an old marching band uniform, his skin pale like dust. As they moved past us, I lifted my phone to record, but the camera feed was completely black. I lowered it, confused, and the scene in front of me was still perfectly clear. Then I noticed something else. The air felt heavy, almost damp, even though the day was dry. The sun dimmed slightly, like a cloud passed over, but when I looked up, the sky was empty. The whole town seemed to hold its breath. I glanced around and realized the people behind us had gone silent too. I turned back toward the street, and the next float was already halfway down the block. The people walking behind it looked faded, like shadows losing their shape. That's when the sound came. It wasn't a voice, not exactly. More like a low collective moan that rose from the crowd. I turned to Hannah, but she was staring forward, frozen in place. Her eyes looked glassy, like the others. I called her name once, twice, then grabbed her arm. The moment I touched her, the world snapped. The air around us dropped in temperature, the colors dulled, and the street that had been full of people seconds ago was suddenly empty. The floats were gone, the flags, the chairs, everything. Just an open road stretching down into silence. My phone buzzed in my hand, and I looked down. The time hadn't moved in almost 20 minutes. The second hand on the clock app was frozen. I felt something tug in my chest, a deep panic I couldn't explain. I turned to run, pulling Hannah's hand, but she wouldn't move. Her expression didn't change, and for a second I thought she was gone. Then I blinked, and everything came back. The noise, the crowd, the laughter. Fireworks popped somewhere in the distance, and Hannah gasped like she had just woken up. She asked why I looked pale, and when I told her what happened, she laughed it off, saying maybe the heat got to me, but my phone was still stuck on that frozen time. Later that night, after the fireworks, I checked the local news page out of curiosity. There was an archived article dated exactly 5 years earlier. It said the town's annual 4th of July parade had been canceled indefinitely after a gas explosion destroyed several floats and killed more than a dozen people, including members of the high school marching band. I showed it to Hannah. She went silent, scrolling through the names. Her eyes widened when she saw one in particular, Mrs. Boyd, the woman she thought she recognized. That was the last 4th of July I ever spent in that town. I don't know what we saw that day, if it was ghosts, a replay of something trapped in time, or something even stranger. But I'll never forget that empty road and how real it felt. Sometimes, when I hear distant fireworks now, I get chills, because I can't shake the feeling that somewhere out there, the parade is still going, marching down that same street with no one left alive to watch. I had just moved into a small apartment complex in a quiet part of town. It wasn't much, but it was mine, and I liked the view from the balcony. That 4th of July, the neighborhood was alive with fireworks. I grabbed a folding chair, some snacks, and a drink and settled in to watch. The air smelled of smoke, barbecue, and something metallic I couldn't place. The sky was lit with reds, blues, and golds, the sound of rockets cracking and whistling echoing between the buildings. At first, everything seemed normal. Families crowded their balconies, kids ran around shouting and waving sparklers, and dogs barked at the explosions overhead. But then I noticed him. Across the courtyard, a man stood completely still, holding a single sparkler. He wasn't celebrating, wasn't waving, and didn't move at all. He just stood there, facing the sky. I blinked and rubbed my eyes, thinking maybe I had missed him earlier, but he didn't shift. His sparkler burned constantly, no smoke, no sparks flying away, just a steady glow in his hand. It looked wrong, like it didn't belong to this world. I leaned over the railing for a closer look, and that's when I realized he wasn't even reflecting the fireworks above him. The colors flickered across the courtyard, but his sparkler glowed steadily, untouched by any shadow or reflection. Curiosity got the better of me. I grabbed my keys and went down to the courtyard to check if it was some kid playing a prank. I walked slowly, heart pounding, eyes fixed on him, but when I got closer, there was nothing. The man was gone, and the sparkler had burned out. I looked around for footprints, any sign he had been real, but the dirt and grass were undisturbed. I thought maybe I had imagined it. The night was crowded after all, and the lights and smoke could play tricks on you. I went back upstairs and tried to shake it off, but the feeling of being watched didn't leave. I glanced at my door, the balcony, the windows of other apartments. Every shadow seemed a little too sharp, every noise a little too close around midnight. I went to bed but couldn't sleep. Fireworks had stopped, and silence settled over the complex. Then I heard it, soft footsteps on the balcony. Slow, deliberate. I froze. My bedroom faced the courtyard, and the sound was coming from the railing right outside my window. I swallowed hard and held my breath, trying to make out what it was. The steps stopped. I peered through the blinds, heart hammering, and saw nothing. The next morning, I went outside to inspect the balcony. That's when I found the sparkler ashes, tiny, glowing embers scattered across the floor, perfectly intact, like someone had just dropped them there. My stomach dropped. I remembered the man holding the sparkler the night before, the way he had stood so unnaturally still, and the steady glow that didn't match anything else. I asked my neighbor about it, an elderly man who had lived there for decades. He went pale when I mentioned the sparkler. He told me about a man who had died in the courtyard 10 years ago, trying to light fireworks. He had apparently set himself on fire accidentally, and his body was found exactly where I had seen the sparkler. No one ever reported seeing him again after that, but residents swore that on the 4th of July, his spirit would appear, holding a sparkler, smiling at the sky. I didn't stay for the rest of the night. I packed up and left, even though I had nowhere else to go. The next year, I found a place across town and moved. I've never seen him again, but every time I hear a sparkler fizz or pop, I get that same feeling, the sense that someone is watching, smiling quietly, and waiting for another 4th of July. I don't know why he showed himself to me, or why he chose this year, but I learned something important that night. Some people, some spirits, are tied to a place so tightly that they never leave. And if you're unlucky enough to cross their path, even for a few seconds, it's a memory you don't forget. I'll never forget the summer I first went to Lake Carmichael. It's not a particularly famous spot, just a small, quiet lake tucked away in a forested area about 2 hours from the city. My friends had been talking about it for weeks, saying it was perfect for camping, swimming, and fireworks. I didn't know much about it, but I was looking forward to the trip, just a long weekend to get away from everything. We arrived mid-afternoon, the sun burning down on the water, casting a golden shimmer across the surface. The lake itself was surprisingly large, surrounded by thick trees, and there was a small, abandoned boathouse on one end. My friends joked about the boathouse being haunted, of course, but I brushed it off. Kids' stories, they said. We set up our tents near the edge of the lake, unpacked food, and spent the afternoon swimming and skipping stones. Everything felt normal, even idyllic. As evening approached, we decided to have a small fire on the shore and watch the sunset. The sky turned pink and orange, and I remember thinking how peaceful it all was. Then someone suggested we go for a nighttime swim. The rest of my friends were eager, so I followed. The water was cold, but refreshing. That's when I noticed something odd, about 50 feet from the shore. The water seemed darker, almost reflecting a deep red hue. At first, I thought it was just the sunset, but the color didn't shift as the sky dimmed. It stayed that same unnatural deep crimson. I mentioned it to my friends, and they laughed it off, saying I was seeing things. But the longer I stared, the more the red seemed to spread. It was subtle at first, just a faint tint beneath the surface, but gradually it grew more vivid, like the lake itself was boiling blood. I started to feel uneasy. My chest tightened, my stomach churned. Something wasn't right. That night, we set off fireworks along the shore, and I tried to shake the feeling of dread. We roasted marshmallows, joked around, and for a while, I felt normal again. But around midnight, the forest went completely silent. The usual sounds of crickets, frogs, and night birds disappeared, replaced by an almost imperceptible hum, vibrating through the ground and the air. My friends noticed it too, and we stopped talking. I went back to the water, partly curious, partly to clear my head. That's when I saw it, a figure, standing waist-deep in the red-tinted water. At first, I thought it was one of my friends playing a prank, but the figure didn't move. It was tall, thin, and completely still. I called out, but no one responded. My voice felt swallowed by the night. I stepped closer, my heart hammering, and saw its face, or rather, the absence of one. The water around it rippled unnaturally, and the crimson color seemed to pulse outward, spreading faster than any natural wave could. The figure raised an arm slowly, pointing toward the shore. I froze. My friends were shouting from the fire, but when I turned to look at them, they were frozen too. As if the night had paused them, panic set in. I ran back to the tents, shouting and shaking my friends. We tried to pack up quickly, but the lake seemed to shift in the moonlight. The red color wasn't staying near the figure anymore. It spread outward, curling along the shoreline, and I could swear I saw shapes moving beneath the surface, hands or limbs reaching up. My stomach turned, and I realized we had no idea what we were dealing with. We left everything behind and ran to our cars, not stopping until we were on the highway, headlights cutting through the dark. Behind us, I thought I saw the lake glowing faintly, the red hue fading only when we turned a corner. I don't know what we saw that night, I can't explain it. Every rational thought I had tried to tell me it was bioluminescent algae or a reflection of the fireworks, but my gut told me otherwise. Years later, I looked up the lake online, curious if anyone else had noticed something strange. There were no reports, no warnings, nothing. It was just a quiet lake like any other. But I know what I saw. I know the red water, the figure, the way the forest went silent. I've told a few friends, and they think I'm exaggerating, but I can still feel it when I close my eyes. The way the water seemed alive, the sense that something ancient and hungry lurked beneath. I haven't gone back. I don't plan to. I keep imagining that lake every summer. That deep, unnatural red spreading through the water, and the figure standing there waiting. I don't know what it wanted or why it showed itself to me. All I know is that some places hide their darkness, and sometimes they let you see just enough to understand that you're not supposed to be there. That night by Lake Carmichael is something I can't shake. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't a trick of the light, and it certainly wasn't just fireworks. Something is down there, waiting under the red surface, and I hope I never find out what it really is. If you ever find yourself near a quiet lake that locals don't talk much about, maybe don't go swimming after dark. Some things are better left unseen, because once you do see them, they never really leave you. Have you ever experienced something that still haunts you to this day? Share your story in the comments. I might just read it next. And if you enjoy true horror stories like this one, make sure to follow for more real nightmares.